Yeah, but that wasn't the phone call.
Have enough to begin, so I'll call to order this meeting, the Oversight Committee. It is 10:07 a.m. Will the Secretary take attendance of the committee?
Mr. Angelou? Mr. Guerin?
Present.
Mr. Holmes?
Here.
Margot?
Here.
Mr. Montgomery?
Here.
Dr. Mulrow?
Here.
Dr. Rice?
Here.
Dr. Rosenfeld?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Members, the draft minutes from the February 17th Oversight Committee are available in your agenda behind tab 1. Are there any corrections to the minutes as circulated? If there are none, the Chair will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the February 17, 2016 Oversight Committee meeting.
So moved.
Have a motion? Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We now have our time on our agenda for public comment. Public feedback is critically important to CPRIT. People of Texas created CPRIT. CPRIT was created to serve the people of Texas. Opening our meetings with public comment underscores the board's commitment to transparency and accountability and reflects those for whom we work. Do we have any requests for public comment? There are no requests for public comment. All right. Now I'd like to go to Chief Executive Officer's report. It's behind tab 2. The Chair recognizes Mr. Roberts to provide his report. Mr. Roberts has several reports for the committee. He will present his reports in the order they appear in your agenda packet and take questions on each item as he works through them.
Thank you, Mr. Guerin. One of the things I always enjoy doing is introducing new staff that have joined us since the last time you folks met. Not that I necessarily like to have turnover, but it does occur. And we have two people here that Gerald Green, Grant Accountant, and Adrian Natal, who has joined us as an executive assistant. Y'all would wave or stand up and be acknowledged, but they are great additions to the staff. The next item on my list, I won't go through the action items. This is a report that we started a meeting or two ago where after you meet, we go back to our offices and develop a list of things we need to attend to. The report is in there. The main item is what has become tomorrow's meeting, the workshop meeting, to discuss the program priorities and to start that process. That is something that the staff is really looking forward to. We've had some rigorous discussions in preparing for that meeting, and I hope that you will find this to be as engaging or as intriguing as we have. The next item is not in your book, but on an annual basis, the Texas Tribune puts together what is called TribFest. And TribFest has been a major gathering, if you will, here in Austin at the end of each September, where they'll have several hundred panelists with 20 or 30 panels, major keynote events. It's become quite the deal, and I have been coveting since I've been at CPRIT to have a panel on cancer, and it does look like we are going to have one. Our new Chief Science Officer, Jim Wilson, has been invited to participate on a panel. Though the panel is not completely rounded out, it looks like President Ron DePino of MD Anderson will be on it, as well as Lance Armstrong will be on it. The others I've heard mentioned aren't confirmed, so I don't want to steal the Trib's thunder there, but I'm really happy. This is an opportunity for us to get out all of the good news that CPRIT does and interact in a very public setting right before the legislative session. My guess is probably 80% of the Texas legislature will attend at one time or another. The next item concerns our recent customer service survey, which is required every 2 years as part of the state strategic plan process. This is the kickoff to the state budgeting process. We completed ours, and there's a couple of highlights that I'd like to call to your attention. For almost every metric, CPRIT improved over 2 years ago. The largest gains are in how customers perceive communicating with our staff. We showed nearly a 10% improvement in the number of customers that agree that CPRIT staff is courteous, knowledgeable, and prompt in responding to inquiries. Our biggest gain was in the percentage of customers who agree that communicating with us by telephone or email is effective. That increased by 20%. This improvement is sweet when placed in context of the last 2 years. As in the last 2 years, as you are well aware, we have increased reporting requirements and taken a number of steps to enforce deadlines of these reports. More reporting and increased enforcement is not necessarily a recipe for happier customers. I can say in all certainty that the improvement is due to the work of the entire team, especially the grant accountants, compliance specialists, and operations staff. Under the leadership of Heidi McConnell, CPRIT enhanced the grant accounting program in 2014 by adding accountants and setting assignments so that each grantee has one consistent point of contact with the accounting staff. Vince Burgess's charge from his day one has been that compliance begins with customer service. The compliance specialists do this through outreach efforts with grantees, including training and technical assistance. This has reduced frustration and dramatically improved on-time reporting. Lisa Nelson's operations team provides a consistent liaison for grantees needing answers during the contracting and reporting process. Finally, our current 2 program managers, Ramona Maggot and Kathy Allen, are at the vanguard of our grant processes to answer inquiries from applicants and act as resources to grantees and free the program chiefs to focus on science, product development, and prevention. Our mission is to identify and advance promising cancer treatments. We talk a lot about the extraordinary scientists and dedicated community health providers that help make this happen, but it's these folks who grease the gears of the machine. Would you folks stand up to be recognized? Now you can leave and go back to work.
Hey, Wayne, when you say customers, who are your customers?
Pretty much everybody that we interact with, and I might add that we had a rigorous discussion with that in our strategic planning process. I would say that first and foremost, it is the citizens of the state of Texas that created us and the legislature that represents them. However, our interaction with the grantees, grant applicants, are certainly the ones that we deal with on a daily basis. And those are the ones that the survey would have gone out to. Obviously, we did not poll the citizens of the state of Texas for it. I try to poll the legislature whenever I can, but this was primarily our grant applicants, those that have received them. The next item that I've got, you've seen before. It is on page 2-7. This is an update of where we stand today with respect to funds available to make awards. And this is a little bit different, as you will hear. We are going to defer some awards in the academic research program to the August meeting in anticipation of receiving additional recruitment awards. If we were to fund every project that has gone through the Scientific Review Council, we would be left with a balance of right at $1.3 million. And in order to make sure that we maximize the use of our funds, we felt at the PIC that it was prudent to delay action on several items until the August meeting when we've got more information. With that, Mr. Guerin, my formal comments are concluded. I'll be happy to try and respond to any questions you folks may have.
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Roberts? No questions. I'd like to also acknowledge the extraordinary improvement in the customer service. That's reflects so well on all the members of the team, and it tells a lot about the culture of CPRIT, that how they handle our customers, how they handle the people that we work for and work with. So congratulations to all of you for that dramatic improvement in 2-year period. In addition to all the many staff members who worked to get prepared for the strategic planning session tomorrow, we had one Oversight Committee member that put an inordinate amount of time into it, and I'd like to acknowledge that. Dr. Rice, thank you very much for all the time that you've committed to that, in addition to your other responsibilities as an Oversight Committee member. I know that you made a big impact on pulling together tomorrow's session, so thanks for doing that. Any questions at all? Any other comments for Mr. Roberts? All right. We now move to our Chief Scientific Officer reports behind tab 3. The chair recognizes Dr. Wilson to provide the Chief Scientific Officer's report. Dr. Wilson also will introduce the PIC Committee's grant award recommendations for recruitment awards. He will present all 4 slates before Mr. Burgess certifies compliance and the Oversight Committee votes. Welcome.
Good morning, thank you. And let me begin by saying how delighted I am to have the opportunity to be part of the CPRIT team, and that the last 2 months have been both drinking from the fire hose, as you might imagine, as well as appreciative of the great support of my colleagues in the agency. And it won't surprise you that Dr. Kripke left the research program in just a superb position of momentum, and it's a real honor to succeed her and to recognize just the incredible contributions that she made, and as you'll hear today, the continued robustness of the Scientific Review Council and their recommendations and enthusiasm for continuing the impact that the research grants and recruitment awards are making on Texas. With that, if I may, I was going to jump into the PIC committee recommendations for the 6 RFAs that have been the subject of review by the Scientific Review Council panels over the past quarter. Those are core facility support, high impact, high risk, multi-investigator research awards, and then the 3 recruitment RFAs. And I'm not entirely sure what point of information you're referring to, but if I'm assuming it is the proposed grant award packet. And on page 5 of that packet is a summary to give you just a 30,000-foot view of the awards that I'm going to be discussing subsequently. A total of 220 applications were considered during this quarter, combining both the grants and recruitment nominations. And as you'll learn, there were 27 grant proposals that are being recommended today and 6 recruitment awards. They address a broad range of priorities that the agency oversight committee has identified for CPRIT, and those are enumerated here in this summary. I'm going to call attention to many of these just to give you some sense of just how important these research awards are to addressing many of the priorities that you've identified. So if I may go forward to, first of all, discuss the core facility support awards. These, as I think you're aware, are instrumental in providing enabling resources, technology for modern cancer research, as well as access to innovative therapeutics. And these are large awards. The applicants can request as much as $6 million over a 5-year period. 4 are being proposed today. The first is a preclinical candidate discovery corps from Baylor College of Medicine. It's led by Dr. Matzuk. And this award is supporting enabling new technology that actually transforms what has been traditional drug screening capabilities from several million to actually being able to, if you can imagine now, screen billions of potential drug candidates. And so this is a really transformative shared resource that will be based at Baylor, but have very significant interactions across the Texas Medical Center. And please let me know if the information is too much or too little as we go through. The second core support award is awarded to University of Texas at Austin. Dr. Dalby is the PI. And this is a more traditional drug discovery resource that takes advantage of what is quite amazing capabilities at UT Austin's School of Pharmacy, and it marries that capability for drug discovery with biologists in Texas Medical Center in particular, where collaborators have identified the potential targets in in cancers of high importance to Texas, such as pancreatic cancer, lung cancer, etc. The third and fourth core facility awards are being recommended to the University of Texas Health Science Center at San Antonio. The first of these is a genomic sequencing and computational core facility. It enables the faculty at San Antonio who are very highly engaged in human genetics and cancer risk, as well as childhood cancer genomics, to actually upgrade their capabilities in genome sequencing. And it also marries that technology with computational biology expertise required for actually sorting through the tens of millions of data points that are actually generated by these efforts. So this is not only a technology support, but also very important to the outreach to high-risk genetic susceptibility individuals that are cared for by that cancer center, as well as their childhood cancer program. And then the second is another shared resource that's being recommended to the UT Health Science Center at San Antonio, led by Dr. Peter Houghton, a recent recruitment to lead their childhood cancer research center, eminent cancer biologist and pediatric focused investigator, who proposes to, with the childhood cancer community in San Antonio and in Dallas, to construct what are called xenografts from pediatric cancer tissues. And these become now actually the forefront of drug discovery in pediatric cancer development, because none exist today. And so Dr. Houghton's core facility will establish these, and I think continue to place Texas at a leading edge of childhood cancer research. to move on to the high-impact, high-research. Yes?
I just wanted to ask one question, if I could. I understand these are not the multi-investigator awards, this is the core awards, but you'd said that, for instance, the first one, the one at Baylor College of Medicine, would have an impact across the medical center there, meaning maybe do these often become a resource which gets shared across or institutions?
So every one of the core resources that we just discussed have strong examples of how there is cross-utilization and leveraging that core resource for investigators in other institutions. And yes, absolutely, these are, I think, very nice examples of how CPRIT is not just funding something that will have an impact in an individual institution, but actually impact across.
Is that something that can be measured if we wanted to sort of try to quantify that, and not asking that be done? Just wondered maybe what you thought about if we wondered how effective that was, or how much of that's going on.
Absolutely, and I think that the metrics in that are subsequent publications as well as subsequent peer-reviewed grants, and I think both of those are the kinds of quantitative data that would support, if you will, the evidence, provide the evidence for this type of collaboration.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jim, just a couple of questions. For these core facilities, is there a minimum time that has to be devoted to cancer research? I mean, obviously, they could be used for other types of diseases, and how do we know that, say, maybe it's going to go 10% cancer, 50% rheumatology, 30% psychiatry?
Yes.
How do we know that our investment as a cancer resource is mostly invested in cancer?
Yes, thank you for that question, because you are correct. In several examples here and in previous CPRIT-supported core resources, they are leveraging institutional investments that go beyond cancer. But the budgets that are reviewed by the Scientific Review Council panels actually are explicitly asked to address that question, and in fact very precisely document the percent utilization and also the direct benefit of the cancer community. And this is carried forward in annual reports that are reviewed, as I say, annually for just this purpose.
And one other question, when you say the core facilities could be used in institutions throughout Texas, are the the use of the core facilities limited to university investigators? Are they open to industry investigators?
I am not able to actually answer that with any specific information. What I can tell you is that the shared resources that are presented here are principally directed to the academic community. However, I can imagine that there will be collaborations going forward in the future where industry partners will value access to some of the fruits of this activity. But I do not believe that any of these are specifically proposing interactions with industry at this time.
So say like that one of our companies that we've supported wants to do some drug discovery.
Yeah.
And say like they call up the facility at Baylor. Will they be told, no, this is only for university use? Or how do we know how that phone call will be handled?
So I don't know the answer to that question specifically. I think it's an important one. What I can tell you in my experience as Cancer Center Director and overseeing cores in Dallas, our approach was to welcome in specific circumstances opportunity for interacting with industry. However, it was at a very different price point because of the institutional and peer review support that were underpinning that particular core resource.
Thank you.
And I must say, was also evaluated on a basis of whether that interaction would have potential benefit to the programs that were being interacted with. So it wasn't a service activity, if you will. It was more developing relationships, etc. So the second shared RFA addressed high-impact, high-risk research awards. These, as I think you're aware, we call them small awards, but they're actually quite significant, $100,000 a year for 2 years for projects that are thoughtful ideas but require preliminary data to go on to more conventional support from other peer resources. And these generate a considerable amount of interest. 151 applications were reviewed. 21 are being recommended for support. It's notable that 2/3 of these come from grantees from institutions that aren't in the top 5, if you will, of CPRIT grantees historically. So I think it speaks to the impact that this mechanism is having in inviting a community across Texas to become interested in cancer research. And the other point that I would like to make is that 11 of these 21 specifically address priorities that have been set, including computational biology, pediatric cancers, and the like. And these have been annotated for you, but I will, in the interest of time, not go through all of the specifics. Multi-investigator research awards are the largest dollar instrument that the research program has available, and these RFAs invite response for projects that bring together investigators with complementary expertise, and they can be within an institution or across Texas institutions. Awardees or applicants can request up to $7.5 million over 5 years. And from my point of view, and I think it's true from the Research Review Council, that the criteria for these awards is that there must be an expectation for making a very significant change in, or paradigm shift in addressing that particular cancer problem. And secondly, that it must demonstrate that there is real integration across the investigators that are involved. This can't be siloed in good ideas, but in 3 different places. There must be evidence of interaction. To that point, of the 31 applications, 2 are being recommended for funding today. Both address lung cancer. Both are led by investigators at MD Anderson, but are, again, as our conversation with Dr. Rice, evidence of multi-investigator across multiple institutions. The first is a project at MD Anderson that is titled Defining and Defeating Mechanisms of Subtype KRAS Mutant Lung Cancer. And this brings together MD Anderson, UT Southwestern, Rice University investigators. And just briefly, why this is important is that KRAS mutant lung cancers represent 1/3 of lung cancers, and you've heard about the impact of precision therapy in many lung cancers, people responding dramatically, but they aren't the individuals with KRAS mutation, and this consortium is to address that problem, and it really does bring together an international superstar group to address. The second MIRA is titled Pathogenesis and Early Progression of Lung Cancer. This is addressing lung cancer at its early stage and brings together expertise at MD Anderson and at Baylor to identify molecular signatures that can be used to more precisely predict the outcome of early diagnosis of lung cancer, and as well give clues to the etiology of lung cancer as it develops. Again, bringing together a team that's uniquely capable of doing this important research, particularly as with lung cancer screening, we're discovering lung cancer at an earlier stage today. And again, many important questions about how to manage those individuals will be illuminated by this research award.
Jim? On the KRAS project, who is the lead institution on that?
MD Anderson.
And I can't tell you how much I think that's a great target. It's kind of, as you know, KRAS is one of the three holy grails of cancer research.
Yes.
It's often been described as an undruggable target.
Right.
And so it seems like a great one to choose.
Agreed. And as I mentioned, I think the team that's been assembled from across Texas really are recognized nationally as at the forefront of what you, as you describe, a really challenging and important problem. So I'm going to move to the recruitment awards. And
Before you move to the
Yes,
recruitment
please.
awards, let's see if there are any questions about these grants
Yeah.
among other members of the Oversight Committee. If not, I have a few questions for you I'd like to ask. You identify, or you note that 4 of these recommendations deal with cancers of particular importance to Texas. Which are those 4?
I'm sorry, which mechanism are we talking about?
Well, under the program priorities, you say that there are 4 that fall into the category population disparities and cancers of importance to Texas. Can you
Yes.
tell me which of those 4 grant recommendations are those?
So we were identifying the 2 MIRAs that address lung cancer as the leading cause of cancer mortality in Texas. The MIRA, the core facility that is coming from UT Austin, and there it is, as I mentioned, the School of Pharmacy partnering with investigators in Texas medical system to address pancreatic cancer and lung cancer and brain cancer, identified specifically to align with cancers of identified importance
And
in
that's
Texas.
that's the grant.
That's the second UT Austin.
What are the other 3?
The
She said
2 mirrors.
the 2 MIRAs.
Oh, 2 mirrors, okay.
That's 3.
And so there's a lot of overlap here, but the xenograph model system that's being proposed from UT Health Science Center in San Antonio is a unique resource that empowers the research in childhood malignancies, again identified as a priority.
So those are the 4 that the number refers
Yes.
to?
Mhm.
Okay. Out of these 33, how many of them fall under one of our priority areas?
So if I go back to that all of these bring innovative investigator-initiated research. So I think that I think, as you appreciate, that's sort of the overlying guidance that the research program is considering.
But you say on this list, so you say 21 out of 33 fall into that category.
I didn't include the 6 recruits, and I didn't include the core resources. I think that's the element there.
Okay. So of the 33 then, how many fall under the priorities and how many fall outside of the priorities?
None of them fall outside of the overall priorities. Of the 33, I've annotated the specific areas of priority that are particularly notable. So 3, prevention and early detection. And what I might say is that there's duplicates here, right? So 2 in computational biology, 9 in the rare and intractable cancers, including childhood cancer, 4 in disparities, and these are liver cancer particularly, and these are represented in among the high impact, high research, or high risk, et cetera. Am I sort of getting
Well,
to
that's
the question?
Previously, we've always had some that did not fall within the priorities, but were
Yeah.
justified for other reasons. So if you're saying every one of these on this slate falls within the priorities, we don't have any that are just research that was so compelling that it was chosen, even though it was outside of the priorities.
Well, I must confess that having just come on board, not sure that I recognize that we would make a difference or not include innovative investigator-initiated research, and that's sort of the point that I was trying to make. None of these fall outside of that particular area.
Well, I guess we'd like to think everything we do is innovative. So,
Particularly if we're funding it with CPRIT funds,
yeah,
absolutely.
but I think that we have these subcategories where we would like it to be innovative, but we'd also like it to address those priorities. And maybe we can talk later, figure out a way to organize this so it's easier to see which priorities are addressed and which priorities are not addressed.
Fantastic, absolutely.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
Could I just maybe add a point of clarification?
Yes.
I think as we go through these in this research subcommittee, each grant is annotated by which of those priorities that it's associated with. So it looks like this table is a compendium of that, and I'm not sure we've ever asked, but maybe we should, to bring forward these priorities with a scorecard or checkbox, so you would know specifically which grant is related to each of these priorities. In other words, I think we do that at the subcommittee level, but you're obviously not able to recall the 21 that meet that, but we could make a table or a list and help bring that forward.
Yeah, and I have that table, and actually, we'll suggest that perhaps that's a mechanism that gets at Mr. Guerin's point. And I think you'll see immediately that this table has, on the last column, identified the particular grants that fall outside of the specific areas of research priorities.
Well, I think the way of presenting this to the Oversight Committee is a work in progress. We'll continue to work on it.
We'll give it another try.
All right, I appreciate it. Dr. Wilson, on there's just one from a score standpoint that seems to be an outlier relative to all the other scores. In the tenure track faculty members, one had a 1.2 score. It's on page 18. I'm just curious how you could have one score be so much different than all the other scores and still be one that was chosen. It's the Rice University.
Yeah. So if I could just reprise how the scoring system is organized. It's a 1 to 9 scoring system, and 1 is exceptional. 9 is somebody you wouldn't want to invite into your living room.
And so this one is just the superstar of the whole bunch.
This is an extraordinary individual among very strong group of 6.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Well, thank you. I don't have any other questions.
Okay. You'll have to signal me if this is too much information.
Okay.
But, I'm sorry?
I'll go ahead with the recruitment package.
Yeah, because I think we're extraordinarily excited about the 6 individuals who are being recommended and hopefully will be recruited to Texas. The first is the individual that we just were talking about, Mr. Guerin, Omid Vasey. He's coming to Rice from MIT and is an individual who brings expertise as a material scientist working with arguably the most eminent material scientist in the world, Dr. Langer, who rates him as an outstanding scientist, but also someone very interested in meaningful application. And as you'll note in the annotation of his of the information provided, he's going to be focusing on delivery of treatments for medulloblastoma, the most common and very difficult childhood brain cancer. Lydia Finley is being recruited to UT Southwestern from Memorial Sloan Kettering, and those of you who read the New York Times Magazine articles on cancer this weekend, she is focusing on one that was particularly highlighted, and that's the role of nutrient utilization that's differentiated in cancer and offers really unique opportunities for both treatment as well as prevention, and is going to focus on pancreatic cancer in her as a CPRIT scholar. Dr. Pellegrino is a cancer biologist who is from Australia, now trained at Memorial Sloan Kettering, and is being recruited to UT Arlington. Part of UT Arlington's efforts, I think, quite significant to build their biosciences expertise, and particularly enthusiastic about the area that he is addressing, which is the relationship between the microbial environment that we all live in. More microbial cells than normal cells make up your body, remarkably, and how that interaction has a potential impact on cancer causation. Dr. Kaufman is a proposed recruit to UT Southwestern from Dana-Farber Harvard Cancer Center, and his research is notable, and it focuses on an important question in melanoma. It turns out that many non-melanoma pigmented cells contain the mutations associated with melanoma, and we don't understand why that doesn't drive toward cancer. And Dr. Kaufman's research at Dana-Farber Harvard has developed the first insights to that important question, published in Science earlier this year, and thought to be one of the most imaginative approaches to this problem. And he'll be studying melanoma as a CPRIT scholar at UT Southwestern. Dr. Fiolowka is an optical physicist, and his talent is to build the modern microscope that's going to allow cancer biologists to look at cancer in ways that they couldn't imagine before. And he's being recruited. He's actually currently at UT Southwestern and will be recruited to their cell biology department. And then finally, Myron Ignatius is a cancer biologist who's being recruited from Massachusetts General Hospital to UT Health Science Center San Antonio, where he will be working in the area of childhood cancers, and will be particularly or significantly interacting in the core facility that I just mentioned that Dr. Houghton has proposed for building these unique resources for studying childhood cancers. Those are the recommended grants and recruitment awards.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson. Do we have any questions for Dr. Wilson at this point? If not, I'd like to ask Mr. Burgess to please come forward as our Chief Compliance Officer and provide the compliance certification report for all the proposed awards at this time, including the product development awards. A little prospective in this regard.
Good morning, Mr. Guerin, Oversight Committee members, Vince Burgess, Chief Compliance Officer. You will find my complete certification report on page 51 of the proposed grant award booklet, and this was also made available to you in the portal. As part of the certification process, as mentioned before, we use a grant pedigree, and the pedigree details every step in the process, beginning with the program officer approval of the RFA all the way through Oversight Committee action. And depending on the program, the pedigree could document anywhere between 45, 55 unique steps in the process. So we review the pedigree, and in the pedigree, we talk about pre-receipt, referral, and assignment to a peer review panel, all the activities of the peer review panel, conflict of interest, all the way through the Scientific Review Council, the Program Integration Committee, and then when it comes to you, we document every step. In the compliance certification, we review third-party observer reports. We have a contractor that attends every meeting as an independent party and observes the activities. They ensure that if there's a conflict of interest, that reviewer does not participate in the review of that application. We review the conflict of interest forms, the post-review statements from all of our peer reviewers, attendance sheets, and we sort of map all this out, make sure everything connects. We also confer with CPRIT staff internally, working with our legal department, our program managers, and SRA, which is our third-party grants administrator. And I'm satisfied that these award recommendations are consistent with the Institute's established grant review process. I do want to make a note that unique to this cycle, pursuant to Texas Administrative Code, Section 702.19, Mr. Roberts granted Michael Lang, our Chief Product Development Officer, a waiver from the general prohibition against communicating with grant applicants. The prohibition against communication begins when the application is submitted all the way through a final determination of the award. This waiver is applicable to 2 product development awards that are before you today. These awards were recommended by the Product Development Review Council to the PIC. The waiver allowed Mr. Lang to discuss possible reductions in the budget for these 2 applicants. And neither applicant was given an unfair advantage because at this point they'd already been recommended by the Product Development Review Council. So, Mr. Guerin, Oversight Committee members, I certify that the review process for the applications that are being recommended for the 4 academic research award slates and the 1 product development research award slate complied with the applicable statutory and administrative requirements. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions from Mr. Burgess? Dr. Rice.
I just wanted to make a comment. I think we know it up here, but I just want to remind those that may be listening, the pedigree you described, which might be 45 or 55 steps in an application process, each of those is not just checked off, but is signed by an individual for every single step.
That is correct. There's a date and
sure.
it's attested to every step.
Thank you.
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you, Dr. Rice. Any other questions or comments? All righty. Mr. Burgess, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Of all the members who are present and voting, I don't have a record of conflict of interest reported by any member for any of the items on our for which we're about to seek approval. Is there anything that has not been reported? I would like to note for the record, although Mr. Angeli is not here, that at this moment he reported a conflict of interest with application numbers RP 160-657, RP 160-704, and RP 160-776 submitted by the University of Texas at Austin. Members, you have the list of applications and grant amounts recommended by the PIC for the Academic Research Grant Awards. The PIC's recommendation will be approved if 2/3 of the Oversight Committee members present and able to vote approve the PIC's funding recommendations. Dr. Wilson presented 4 academic research award slates. Rather than taking up each recommendation individually, I'll ask for a vote to approve the slate. If any member wants to consider one or more award recommendations separately, please make a motion to do so. Starting with the first award slate, I will entertain a motion to approve each of the PIC's 4 recommendations for core facility support grant awards.
So moved.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Hearing approval from at least two-thirds of the members present, the motion carries. Moving to the second award slate, I will entertain a motion to approve the PIC's recommendation for the high-impact, high-risk awards.
So moved.
Have a motion? We have a motion and a second. All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, and hearing approval from at least two-thirds of the members present and able to vote, the motion carries. The third award slate is the Multi-Investigator Research Awards. I will entertain a motion to approve the PIC's recommendation for the two Multi-Investigator Research Awards submitted by the University of Texas MD Anderson Cancer Center.
So moved. Second.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed. Hearing approval from at least two-thirds of the members present and able to vote, the motion carries. Moving to the Recruitment Awards, the last slate in the first-time tenure-track Recruitment Awards, I will entertain a motion to approve the PIC's recommendation for the Recruitment Awards submitted by Rice University, UT Southwestern, UT Arlington, and UT Health Science Center in San Antonio.
So moved.
All in favor? Vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing approval from at least two-thirds of the members present able to vote, the motion carries.
Can I ask?
Mr. Montgomery.
I'm sorry. Can I ask just a quick question, Dr. Wilson? Of the people we're trying to recruit, what are the chances? In other words, we've got, six or eight people. What do we think our chances are of getting them? Any idea?
Well, the historic answer is that 25% decline for various reasons. Among the first-time tenure track, it's a higher percentage of success, and as you heard, these are very extraordinary and accomplished individuals, so the competition is very keen, but because of CPRIT, Texas is in a very advantaged position to attract these folks.
How many other offers would they get that include, for the first time people, a $2 million?
Rare. And of course, as you recognize, it's not just $2 million, it's matched by $1 million from the institution. So that's an extraordinary recruitment tool. And as a consequence, you're seeing just really the pick of the litter, quite frankly.
Great, thank you.
Just imagine if we could pay that much to recruit five-star football players into Texas. We wouldn't be losing all these players to Alabama and Oklahoma. Okay. Next, Dr. Wilson, thank you. Appreciate your presentation. I'll entertain a motion delegating contract negotiation authority to the CEO and CPRIT staff and authorize the CEO to sign the contracts on behalf of CPRIT.
So moved.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none in opposition, the motion carries.
Thank you, members.
Now I'd like to ask our Chief Product Development Officer, Mike Lang, to come forward, and members of the materials he's going to refer to behind tab 4. The Chair recognizes Mr. Lang to provide the Chief Product Development Officer's report. Mr. Lang also will present the PIC recommendations for 2 Product Development Awards. Mr. Lang, welcome. Welcome back.
Thank you, Mr. Guerin. Appreciate that. So I'll start by providing a brief overview of the product development report. Our grant processes continue to proceed per our normal process. Today we're going to discuss 2 grant awards that were recommended, again, through our standard process. Review cycle 16.1, we had 25 applicants, of which those went through our standard process of, a review by our peer reviewers, selection for presentation at a peer review meeting, of which 12 were selected for presentation, and of those, 2 were ultimately selected by the Product Development Review Committee, and the due diligence assessment is conducted by an outside party for approval, and those approvals obviously were recommended by the PDRC. So we'll talk about those at the close of the process. 16.2 cycle is underway. We just had our peer review meetings last week. We had 32 applicants, of which 13 were selected to move forward. I'll just note that we're getting large numbers of applicants. We've been having extensive outreach to make people aware of CPRIT, both within Texas and more broadly, attending various conferences and that. So we're trying to enhance the awareness of CPRIT, and I think that's resulted in both an improvement in both quality and quantity of applicants. So we're very pleased with that. One of the other things that we're doing is trying to improve our peer review process. We have, it generally works well. There's been some specific opportunities that the PDRC recommended to improve the diligence process. So we're working with our third-party diligence provider to improve their the quality of their report, specific information they provide. So that work is underway, and we think that will provide further opportunity for improvement. The other thing is, as we go through each cycle, we get questions. Our third-party administrator gets questions. So as we think about those, we try to improve our RFA, our request for application document. So we've identified several changes that we're making to our RFA that I thought appropriate to appraise you of. First of all, just the preponderance of our applications are for cancer therapeutics, drugs that treat cancer. We're just highlighting that CPRIT is amenable to investing in across a wider range of technologies we have, but we just want to make sure people are aware of that, of our interest in diagnostics and devices, etc. We've always had fairly specific criteria about relocating or locating in Texas, either being here initially or relocating here. We're just restating those and highlighting those to, again, provide additional clarification on that point. We have historically the preponderance of our awards have been in companies that are prior to starting clinical trials, and then we would fund the completion of the preclinical work necessary to apply to Food and Drug, and then typically the early, the first stage of clinical studies. The preponderance of our awards are in that phase, and we're just going to clarify that some of we have had a few applicants, especially in this round, who've applied for awards at a relatively late stage in the process. So we're going to clarify that that's probably not the optimal use of CPRIT funds, that we're going to focus on earlier companies, starting more companies, and progressing these earlier companies through proof of principle, through the initial clinical testing that demonstrates the efficacy of the safety and efficacy of their technologies. And lastly, we have had a number of, having a larger portfolio now, we're finding that some of our companies are reapplying for other award or for second awards, in some cases for novel projects, but in many cases for variants of existing projects. So we think it's appropriate, and we're recommending it, we're putting in the RFA, that companies that have received a CPRIT award would no longer be eligible for a second award, to clarify that. We think, again, that maximizes the impact of CPRIT, allowing us to start more new companies, allowing us to work with the companies that are working with the newest science and advance those into the clinical development process. So those are some recommended changes that we're incorporating into this next RFA that will be going out for award cycle 17.1.
When you said you're clarifying the relocation clause, what brought that on?
Just questions about, with some of our companies that we've gone back and looked at, as we've done, as Vince and his team have done their normal diligence process, there's been questions about where the specific people are that are in the company, where they're located, how much money is being spent in Texas versus elsewhere. So it's caused us to go back and look at some of the original contracts that were initiated with these companies some time back. And as we reviewed those, we thought there's an opportunity for clarification there, just to make sure that we're operating, that everyone has the same information and is operating to the same set of rules, if you will.
Were there some companies that were making, I could say it, token relocations for grant purposes? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, not necessarily, but they vary. There are some companies that for good business reasons, they've maintained a portion of their of their development staff, maybe at the institution that the technology was developed from. And, the rationale for that may be that, that they want to maintain a collaboration with the original PI or with the institution. But in other cases, we looked at that and we said, how do we know that's the case? Is that really necessary? So we think there's an opportunity for clarification here. But yeah, there's the preponderance of our companies are fully located in Texas in full compliance. But there are exceptions to that I think we need to be mindful of, and we're trying to provide clarification for future situations.
Thank you. One of the types of employees you mentioned in your memo is the virtual employee. And when you consider the realities of the marketplace of 2016, this is a harder concept. It's easier to apply in theory than it is in practice.
You're absolutely right.
With telecommuters, with virtual employees, and I think I'm glad you're addressing those issues, because I think some of these can't be thought through in conventional terms. 50 years ago, we could say, my gosh, every one of these people is or is not in Texas. But now with telecommuting and virtual employees, and it's easier said than done, it seems to me.
No, you're absolutely right, and that's the reason we need to be thoughtful about this. The preponderance of our funds that we provide to companies gets really spent in one of three areas: the employees of the company, the manufacturer of the drug, and the clinical trials to test them. So the second, if the clinical trials are always going to be widely distributed. These patients, you're going to want to work with institutions, obviously in Texas, but elsewhere as well. So in that cost is typically, or those expenses are typically provided through contractors called CROs, clinical research organizations. Contract manufacturing, again, is a very large component of the cost. We try to utilize Texas-based providers, but these are very specialized services that sometimes are not available in Texas, and so we have to be mindful of that. The company, we can't ask them to use a Texas resource when there isn't one available that has that appropriate expertise. So the employees is the one area where we do have a bit more opportunity to influence that. I personally think it's important that we maximize the number of employees, especially the key staff members that are here in Texas. Because obviously the current economic impact, but by bringing these thought leaders to Texas, hopefully they'll see the next generation of startups, that people who will join a startup today and as a vice president of some function, and have that work with that company for some period of time, hopefully successfully, and then decide they want to do something on their own and start their own company. So I've known many folks that have done that, and if they're here, then we think the opportunity is more companies will be started here in Texas. So we think this is beneficial for the state, but we do have to be mindful of exactly what you're saying.
Mr. Montgomery?
Yes, sir. I think what Mr. Guerin is asking is part of the compliance process where they played football. I did have another question, though. Mr. Lang, you said that some companies are applying for second round of financing from CPRIT because something changed in the company. How often do you see people who say, we're going to pursue X drug or X therapeutic, and then they find out it doesn't quite work the way they thought, and they need more money to approach it at a different... Is that what's happening, or is it just they need more money? And
we haven't had that happen, but we had in this latest round, we had a company apply for a CPRIT grant, where they had received a CPRIT grant to fund the development of a particular compound. It's going well, and now they're applying for another CPRIT grant to fund the development of a manufacturing site for that compound. Now, that would be here in Texas, and that's something we want to consider. Another company has has a drug that's already in development that they want to expand to another indication that they've applied for a second CPRIT grant for. Yet a third one has a drug that we funded that's progressing well, and they have another program that they're considering funding. So,
okay, thank you.
These are just examples.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Lang at this point? Ask that you move and present your recommendations now.
Thank you. So we, as noted earlier, product review cycle 16.1 has resulted in the recommendation from the PDRC for 2 awards to be provided, 2 CPRIT awards. The first one is a company called Solarius. They're developing a small molecule. It's targeted at 2 cancers. First is a rare pediatric cancer called Ewing sarcoma, one of the rarest cancers, but very fatal and affecting primarily childhood or children. It's also targeted at prostate cancer, which is at the opposite end of the spectrum of one of the top 5 largest prevalence cancers. This is a small molecule. It basically targets a specific receptor. There's a specific protein that is overactive in these cancers, and this drug basically reduces the activity of that particular control protein. Both of these programs, I'll note, are very typical of the therapeutics programs that we've developed. To my earlier comments, they are operating companies. They've identified their lead compound. Some level of product development has proceeded. They have done some safety and efficacy work. What we will be funding is the completion of that safety and efficacy work, the development of an IND package, which is what's submitted to Food and Drug for approval, and then initial clinical studies in this case, for both Ewing's and prostate cancer, as well as the development of backup compounds. So these are both very typical of our prior awards. Solarius received an award of received a score of 2.0. So I think that's nearly one of the best scores that our peer reviewers have ever provided. So this was a generally very well received project. The technology comes from University of Utah, and the company will be relocating to Houston upon award. As was previously noted, subsequent to the PIC recommendation, I was waiver. Thank you. I'm not good. I'm not as experienced on the legal side.
That's
legal
why we have a lawyer.
terminology. Yeah. A waiver was approved such that we could engage in specific discussions with both companies around their budgets, and simply that from the time that the companies have made these applications until now, progress has occurred. Things may have changed, so we wanted to re-review the company's development programs with them and assess if any budgetary changes were needed. So in both cases, budget reductions were made based on, again, the progress the company has made in the interim. So that's been successfully addressed. There is one pre-approval contingency that the PDRC requires. The company's freedom to operate opinion, which is a legal opinion as far as whether their technology is infringent upon others' technology. They have a quote clean freedom to operate opinion, but it's a couple years old. So the PDRC would like a new updated freedom to operate opinion to be generated by, again, external counsel. So that was recommended as a pre-approval contingency. So we're addressing that. Subsequently, Dr. Rosenfeld and I have had a number of conversations over the past week or so, again, subsequent to the PIC approval and all of these documents being put into our portal. Dr. Rosenfeld is recommending that we include another pre-approval contingency to confirm that the PDRC has reviewed the company's toxicology reports and is accepting of them. Dr. Rosenfeld, is that an accurate description of our conversations?
It's more...
Could you please, Thane, turn on your microphone?
It's more pharmacokinetics and ADME than toxicology.
Thank you.
But there were some reports that came up subsequent to the review by the Product Development Committee, and we just want to make sure that the Product Development Committee has seen these reports.
And just to clarify, these are conditions that will be pre-contracting, not pre-approval.
Good, thank you. Good, yes, appropriate clarification, pre-contracting. And in both cases, these can be addressed in relatively short order. So in parallel to the contract discussions.
Before you move on to the next recommendation, let's go ahead and see if there are any other questions regarding Solarius from other members of the committee, either to Mr. Lang or to Craig. If there are none, proceed.
Thank you.
Maybe just one medical statement. Ewing sarcoma. Ewing sarcoma is quite rare, maybe about 500 cases a year.
In the U.S., correct.
And about half of those are cured by local procedures, surgery, and some chemotherapy. So it's about 250, well, maybe about 200 cases a year that need additional treatment, and that's just what we're looking at in this rare pediatric tumor.
Yeah, this particular this particular drug is targeting primarily Ewing sarcoma. There's also a cohort of other related cancers called Ewing syndrome, and there's several thousands of those. And they're hopeful that this will also have efficacy in those patients. And of course, prostate cancer is one of the top 5 largest prevalence cancers.
When you refer to those numbers, is that the United States? Is that the state of Texas?
Those are U.S.
United States.
U.S. incidence numbers, the number of new
Okay.
diagnoses annually in the U.S.
Okay, thank you.
So moving on to Pelican then.
Yes, unless there are any questions, I go ahead and proceed to Pelican.
Okay.
Thank you.
Again, a similar program in terms of its stage of development and requested CPRIT support. This is an antibody therapy that stimulates immune response to treat a variety of cancers. They're initially targeting melanoma cancer, which again is one of the largest prevalence cancer. Also looking at applications in lung, bladder, and renal cancers. This antibody is targeting a newly discovered receptor. It's a receptor, again, it's found on a number of these cancers. This, to our knowledge, or to the company's knowledge, is the only compound that's targeting this novel receptor. So if successful, this could be a groundbreaking technology in this area. I will note this is intended to be used in conjunction with current immunotherapy technologies or immunotherapy drugs. Also very high scoring, 2.3. So again, near the top of the historical scoring pattern. Also had the same concern that the freedom to operate opinion had been conducted, was clean, but was several years old, and so the PDRC recommended updating that again as a pre-contracting contingency. So, and again, similar support requested from CPRIT. That we would be funding the completion of the preclinical development, the completion of the IND study, and initial phase 1 clinical study to assess both safety and efficacy in melanoma patients. Again, typical of of the preponderance of our prior awards. I'll stop here and ask if there's any questions.
Michael, do you know where these where these companies propose to relocate in Texas?
Solarius is technology coming out of University of Utah. They're planning to relocate to Houston, down to the Texas Medical Center, campus there. Pelican is the two folks who are the keys there. One is a resident of Connecticut. One is a resident of Austin, Texas, of all places, and they're planning to relocate the company here. So the gentleman who's in Connecticut will be relocating here, along with the rest of the team.
Any other questions?
Mike, these are strictly grants. We're not taking any other royalty or equity or otherwise.
These, correct. These are our typical product development awards made under the standard revenue revenue return that the Oversight Committee has approved. Our typical 4% royalty return. So there's been no discussion with either company about anything other than our standard award award standards.
Mr. Roberts looks like he's leaning forward. You have a
Well,
comment?
and just to clarify for the record, and I may have heard the question wrong, so for every grant that we make, we must make that via contract. And every contract that gets executed, whether it is in product development, academic research, or prevention, includes revenue sharing arrangements. So these two companies, which we hope will be very successful, will eventually return revenue to CPRIT pursuant to the revenue sharing terms. And absent any indication otherwise, we use the standard revenue sharing terms. Now, it could be that during the contract negotiation, Mike identifies some reason why equity or some different revenue sharing standard would be appropriate. If that were the case, he would come back to the Oversight Committee and get that specifically approved.
Any further questions? Mr. Lang, could I ask you to speak to you recommended that these budget proposals be each decreased by a certain amount. Could you speak to that before we get to the...
Sure. I'll just get the numbers, the specific numbers. Again, as we noted, it's been a number of months since these awards were initially approved, or since these applications were initially submitted. So progress has occurred in the case of both companies. In the case of Solarius, as we reviewed their current activities and recast their budget, approximately $250,000 reduction was made in their budget. Pelican was a more significant reduction, about almost $3 million reduction in the Pelican budget, again based on the fact that they've accomplished some of the activities that were originally contemplated in the CPRIT award. So the total of the two is a nearly $3 million budgetary reduction from what was originally requested at the time of original application.
And just for clarification, during the budget negotiation process, the amount approved by the Oversight Committee is always the maximum amount. And so there are frequently times where there will be an identification of, perhaps the grantee has included expenses that aren't reimbursable under state rules, or, like Mike said, they've made progress, and so we're not going to be paying for something that they had originally requested. So then we make the contract for that amount. In this case, because we are so focused on how much money we have left to make grant awards, that's why we went ahead with the lifting the restriction on the communication and pre-negotiating those budgets now, so that the maximum amount that you're approving is leaving $3 million on the table that can be used for awards for the rest of the fiscal year.
And one other clarifier, the numbers that I stated are the amount that CPRIT will be awarding. Obviously, their total budget is larger than that because it will include their matching funds. So, so a $20 million, when we're approving a $20 million award, it's for a program that will require, $30 million in total expenditures. So.
All right. Mr. Chairman.
Dr. Rice.
Does the review process that we just went through to try to assure that the budget is very, very tightly accurate, is that something we want to consider doing going forward, given the perpetual kind of challenge we have budgetarily each year, trying to, be very opportunistic or optimizing?
Yes.
Yeah, I would recommend so, and I already have.
Is that a rule change for us, or how would that proceed, or we just do waivers?
I think the waiver is something that's already in our rule, and then you can, it requires notification of the Oversight Committee. It's also something that can be done either after the PDRC recommends it or after the PIC. So it's clear that there's no, no extra benefit that one company is getting by communicating with the chief.
Do I remember it's in the statute that we not communicate, and therefore the waiver would be required each and every time?
It is at least in our rules, and I'd have to check to see if that also comes from our statute. It has been always part of our process that we do not communicate with grantees or grant applicants while we're going through the review process until they have a final decision, and so that may be earlier in the process if they're falling out of the process. But for these, the restriction on communication will not end until you vote to approve, unless there's a waiver granted.
Just a point of clarification, this budgetary review was conducted by myself and the PDRC. So we had one specific PDRC member that I collaborated with who has a great deal of expertise in managing these programs, and he provided extensive guidance on where opportunities for adjustments would be found. So it's a joint process.
All right. Any other questions? Members, as you remember, Mr. Burgess is already certified that the compliance with our guidelines of the review process for the development awards. No Oversight Committee members have reported a conflict of interest with either application to be considered today. I will now entertain a motion to approve the PIC's recommendation for Solarius Pharmaceuticals and Pelican Therapeutics with revised budget amounts as recommended by the Chief Product Development Officer.
So moved.
Please let me finish the motion. We want to have the numbers in the motion. The revised budget amount for Solarius is $18,688,144. The revised budget amount for Pelican is $15,245. Pardon me, $15,245,222. Do I have a motion? We do have a motion and a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. I will entertain a motion delegating contract negotiation authority to the CEO and CPRIT staff and to authorize the CEO to sign the contract on behalf of CPRIT.
So
Got a motion and a second? All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries.
Thank you, members.
Members, Mr. Roberts, Mr. Lang, thank you very much for your, and also want to thank you for getting all around the state and meeting with each of us personally and sharing your experience with us and helping educate us as we grow in our roles and our work with you. I appreciate you doing that. I know
It's my
time-consuming.
pleasure to do so. It's also my privilege to work with this group of people. I couldn't be more pleased to be a part of this wonderful team, both the staff as well as the Oversight Committee. So thank you very much for your learnings, your guidance to me. I appreciate it, and it's a great learning opportunity for me.
All right, thanks a lot. Members, Mr. Roberts has notified the board by letter provided to the Oversight Committee on May 12th, indicating that he seeks authority to disperse grant funds in advance to the company we have just approved for an award. Are there any questions for Mr. Roberts regarding this request? Hearing none, I'll propose a motion pursuant to the General Appropriations Act, Article 9, Section 4.03A. Do I have a motion to authorize CPRIT to disperse grant funds via advance payments to Solarius Pharmaceuticals and Pelican Therapeutics upon execution of the award contract and the successful completion of tranches? Have a motion?
Second.
And a second? All in favor, vote aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, now I'd ask the members to turn to tab 5 and ask Dr. Garcia to please give our Prevention and Communications Officer report. Dr. Garcia, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Guerin. Good morning. Under tab 5, I just have some updates for you on our two programs, Prevention and Communications. For this current cycle in prevention, we'll be meeting next week to consider applications that came in, 44 of those. Those recommendations will be presented to you in August. Then I just want to highlight some of the discussions we've had lately. Well, I think last February you had a discussion about geographic coverage of the state. And at that time we had two counties that we had never really covered with direct services. Are in the process of getting our quarterly grantee reports in. One grantee reported that they were covering more counties than they had proposed to, and those two counties happened to be covered in their new report. So we can say that over time we have been in every single county in the state with direct services. So that was quite a milestone for us, and we were pleased to see that. You have a map on the back side of that report with the current coverage, And this is, of course, a snapshot in time. And again, we have 2 counties that don't have direct services right now with the active projects. But if we look at it cumulatively, we have been in those 2 counties. So I just wanted to point out this is a moving picture. We will see a bit different map each time. We are working, and we have continued working on updating the quarterly progress report from our grantees. That should be in the programming phases right now and should be beta tested with a couple of our grantees very soon. One of the main things that will do for us is then actually report what number of services are being provided in each county. Right now we have information on what they're proposing to do, but the revised quarterly reports will tell us the actual number of services being provided as they report quarterly. So that will be some very good data. Probably won't have that wrapped up until August, and then we'll have to phase that into our reporting timeline. Another project that we have undertaken in prevention is to look at cumulative all of our projects and identify each county that they're touching, so that now we can run a report for you. For example, we know we've had 14 projects in Dallas County. We can run a report for you of all 14 of those projects and let you know a little bit more about what is going on project-wise in those counties. So I want to recognize Ramona Maggot for her hard work in pulling that together. I think that'll be a good data point for us. So as you're visiting representatives or anyone and you want this information by county, just give us a call and we're happy to run a report for you. Dr.
How difficult is it to run those reports? In other words, I call today, does it take a few days, a week, 2 weeks?
If Ramona's not busy, it'll take a few minutes. Right, Ramona?
I think that's a great tool. Thank you very much for doing that.
If I may, I wondered, is that something that is part of an SRA report, or is that something we do manually or through another system inside our system?
It's something we are doing manually inside our system. Once we, with the quarterly reports, that will be through an SRA reporting system when they're actually reporting what they're doing in each county. So that will be more automated for us. But this is a look at what they have proposed to do. So we have that currently available.
Thank you. Mr. Margot?
Are we automatically sending these out to the various state representative offices and senators?
We have not. We have done it based on requests. We can surely look at targeting certain key legislators and pulling together their specific counties, I guess, in their districts.
I'd give it to all of them. I'd give them to their staff. Every time you do update the report, I'd send it out. I mean, if it's this easy and to obtain.
Well, the report is 254 different sheets in a workbook, so you do have to run the report by. I guess for them it would make more sense by district. I would
yeah, that's
think,
what I'm
rather
saying.
than a big dump.
Right.
Of 254.
I mean, how much trouble is
spreadsheets.
it to run it by district?
Some of them have quite a few counties. It probably wouldn't.
Well, at least once
To
a
do-
year, I would say you need to do
that.
this and just automatically send it out whether
Send
they
it to
requested it or
everyone.
not, give them, brief their
We can-
staff. I mean, that's
it's a good
just
suggestion. We
walk
can
by
look
and say,
into
hand
that.
it to them, and here it is, especially the senators too.
Good suggestion and very important information.
Okay.
And I know it's taken a lot of effort by all of you to pull all that together, but commend you for doing it. And it'll help all of us do our jobs, but it'll also help our customer most broadly defined know how we're serving the people of Texas.
Absolutely. So that is my prevention update. I'll move to communications if there's no questions about prevention.
Any other questions for Dr. Garcia? All right, please proceed.
So I think, yesterday we had a press event, sort of celebrating a very important milestone for the agency, our halfway point in our funding authority. And so I want to thank all of those who were there. We had about 80 people in the room, and Mr. Margot, Dr. Rice, and thanks to Mr. Montgomery for helping us with the introduction to that event. We did a lot of work to try and reach out to the media in advance. We had a media advisory that went out last week. We also sent it out early Monday to more than 1,000 media outlets. We also sent out a press release, embargoed it right before the event. We sent that out Tuesday, again, to about 1,000 outlets. We had a live video stream of the event so that reporters in other parts of the state could listen in and pick it up. So we were doing everything we could to make it as easy as possible for reporters to pick up this event. Going into the event, we had interest from about 7 different media outlets. On site, we actually conducted 3 interviews. Mr. Roberts did 2 of those, one with the Houston Chronicle, one with the San Antonio Business Journal, and Dr. Wilson did another one of those with Time Warner. And this morning, we've seen at least 2 stories come out, and we hope to see more as time goes on. Last night, the communications team put together some video clips of the event and blasted that out to 149 different reporters, again trying to give them material and information that they can use to pick up stories if they want to. So we've also seen some good activity on social media, some tweets and Facebook. But as you know, it's challenging to get good news stories out there, especially when you're competing, as we were yesterday, with a lot of other news. And as you might expect on any day, there was a hearing on Zika virus. The Attorney General our Texas State Attorney General at the last minute held a press conference at 1:30. So of course, the reporters are stretched pretty thin, and we'll be picking up on some of these news stories as well. So.
And a UT police officer shot himself.
Yes, so lots of things going on yesterday, but they do every day. The last thing we are doing is we're developing our own news clip of the event that we will put up on YouTube and on our website. So it's, all in all, I thought was a very positive event, and we'll have a lot of content that we can continue to use in other ways. So.
Is it true that Mr. Montgomery's speech has gone viral?
I'll have to check. It might have been
in places you will never see.
It might have been those dance moves that, that went viral.
There was one of your prevention programs that you didn't mention today, but it was in your report, UT Southwestern, and it was a genetic testing to determine a person's predisposition to cancer.
Yes.
And it touched just an extraordinary number of people. I was fascinated just by the little thumbnail sketch of the program. Could you speak to that a little bit? I mean, what's involved in collecting that kind of genetic data, and how hard is it to? Well,
the program is really genetic testing and counseling and getting out to people through. They do it through a variety of sources. One of the places is where they are screening for mammography, so take advantage of a screening program that's going on and reaching people that way. They also have telemedicine capabilities, so that also extends their reach quite a bit because there are not very many genetic counselors in the state. So really, you do the testing, you really need to have the genetic counseling go along with that testing. So
how do they collect the genetic material to do the testing?
Well, what they're doing is a risk assessment. So they're assessing through family history and other kinds of tools whether you are at high risk because of your family history. And so if they identify you as a high-risk individual, they will put you through some genetic counseling and recommend that you follow certain screening, guidelines. What part of this project is, as they are also collaborating with the mammography screening program, if they're detecting tumors, then they're collecting that sample from the tumor itself for further genetic testing. So really, this project is just supporting the collection of that material. But that's not the main part of the program, collecting the tumor samples. The main part is identifying through family history and other survey-type tools whether individuals are at high risk.
And do they get help with the screening process if it's recommended?
Yes, absolutely. That is one of the requirements of all of our projects, that you help navigate them through the process. You don't just help stop once you've identified an issue.
Mr. Chairman?
Dr. Rice?
I wondered, through a program like that, which sounds great, I wondered if we sort of have any kind of a mechanism to understand, the positive effects that might have. In other words, a family history might give us a hint that there's a BRCA mutation, which might encourage someone to, even if they didn't have a positive biopsy finding, might drive them towards, again, with the navigation and all. Any feedback mechanism on that to know kind of how many people would be identified that might have a serious problem that wouldn't have otherwise been recognized?
Yes, in their quarterly reports, we ask for that kind of information and to track them as far as they can to, if there is a diagnosis made and stage. And so in some cases, they can keep track of these patients and report all the way through diagnosis, and in other cases, they can't. But at least we'd like to track into what kind of actions these people actually took. Did they go sign up for a screening? Did they have any prophylactic surgery as a result of their genetic risk?
Thank you. I was just thinking about those kinds of things might be really important and valuable to also be including with things we might share with legislators who want to more deeply understand the efficacy of not just the research and the product development side, but the prevention side.
Thank you, Dr. Rice.
If I may,
Certainly.
just to follow up on Dr. Rice's comment, there are some very good videos on our website about people just like that, who had a family history, who didn't know they were at risk, who are now being treated on cancer-free, and they're powerful, I think. But I just wanted to add to you and to Mr. Roberts and all others who participated. I thought the conference yesterday went very well, and if people don't pay attention, we've done everything we can, but it was of the right length and of the right dimension, and it's something the staff should all be very, very proud of, because they're terrific accomplishments.
Thank you. I want to also recognize Jeff Hillary, our communications specialist, put a lot of work into that, and our communications
IT folks
team.
And it's like everything else at CPRIT. When you're a small staff, it's hard to find somebody who did not participate in a project of that magnitude.
So 2 more quick updates on the communications front. We are starting our conference planning for 2017. We put out a request for proposals for a meeting planner. That meeting planner has been selected. It was the same firm that helped us with the last one. So our next step there is to put out an RFP for hotels. And yes, hope that process goes smoothly and we can present a recommendation to you in August.
Is the plan for that to be in Austin again?
We will start with hotels in Austin and see if we're successful in finding dates and times and venues that'll work for us.
And coffee.
And coffee, yes.
There will be coffee at the next meeting.
Yes, we'll be a little more generous with the budget this time. I think we were all a little nervous about our experience the first time through, doing it a bit differently.
I don't think we should charge for bathroom privileges again.
Maybe just plain coffee and decaf, no lattes.
No
We don't
lattes
go
in the
crazy,
morning.
but
Okay.
just, all right, thank you.
And the other update is we are going to be working on redesigning our website. We've evaluated some vendors for that. We thought it would be a contract we'd have to bring to you, but it's coming in under $100,000. We haven't quite finished that process, so we'll let you know who the vendor is that we've selected at the appropriate time. So, thank you.
All right. Are you completed with your report?
That completes my report.
Any questions, Dr. Garcia? All right, thank you very much for your report and good work of you and your team.
Thank you.
Now direct Oversight Committee members to tab 6. Mr. Roberts will present the appointments to the Scientific Research and Prevention Program Review Panels.
Thank you, Mr. Guerin. I've appointed 15 peer reviewers to the various panels. 2 are to the product development research panels, 7 are to the prevention panels, and 6 are to the academic research panels. State law requires the appointments be approved by the Oversight Committee. The Nominations Subcommittee recommends approval of these. The individual appointments were discussed at each of the 3 program subcommittees as well. Though they did not make any recommendations, they appeared supportive of the appointments. So I recommend approval. Their information regarding each of them is behind tab 6, and I recommend approval.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Is there a motion to approve the Scientific Research and Prevention Program Committee appointments?
So moved.
Got a motion? Have a second?
Second.
All in favor, vote aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. Ask now to turn to tab 7. Mr. Roberts, please present the conflict of interest waiver for Dr. Garcia.
Right, this is similar, but it is different to some other waiver requests that I've brought to you. This one in particular is to approve a conflict of interest waiver in FY 2016 for Dr. Becky Garcia, who is a member of the PIC. And we believe that I believe there are exceptional circumstances requiring her participation. The background to the waiver is included in the memo behind you, but in sum, Dr. Garcia, with my permission, recently accepted an appointment to the advisory committee serving the Texas Health Improvement Network, a statutorily created program that is administratively attached to the University of Texas system. The waiver is necessary for Dr. Garcia to participate in CPRIT's review process as a PIC member. Together with the waiver's proposed limitations outlined in the memo, adequate protections are in place to mitigate the opportunity for the award of grant funds to be driven by anything other than merit and established criteria. Some important points regarding the waiver, as with the other ones, is you, the Oversight Committee, may amend or revoke or revise this waiver, as well as the waiver is limited exclusively to the conflict of interest specified in the request. I will add that Dr. Garcia's being requested to participate in this panel is a testament to CPRIT staff, and I very proudly gave her authority to participate in this and request your approval.
Congratulations being asked to serve on that, Dr. Garcia. Any questions of Mr. Roberts? With no questions, members, is there a motion to approve the proposed Health and Safety Code Section 102.1062 waiver for Dr. Garcia?
So moved.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, vote aye. Any opposed? None opposed. Motion carries.
Thank you, members.
Now, ask you to turn to tab 8 and our Chief Operating Officer, Ms. McConnell. At this time, I recognize Ms. McConnell to present the Chief Operating Officer's report, including the agency's state strategic plan and legislative appropriations request.
Good morning. So under tab 8 is my memo pretty much my standard memo reporting my quarterly information. Within that memo is information about the state strategic planning process. We did receive instructions from the Governor's Office and Legislative Budget Board on April 6th. We've been working on that strategic plan. There aren't any major changes that we're requesting in terms of the budget structure, and this is also the primary vehicle where we request changes to our measures, and we have requested changes to 3 of our measures, actually, well, a change to one, the addition of another, and the striking another measure. The addition of a compliance measure, and to replace the compliance measure that we requested to strike because the data is very difficult to assess at certain times because it was based on delinquency of reports by grantees, and that is an ongoing process. And so actually in that we're in negotiation with the Legislative Budget Board and Governor's Office, and the Legislative Budget Board has asked us to propose another measure to replace the measure we requested deleting. So we have, and we're waiting to hear back from them. But those are really the only changes that we've requested. The budget structure, which is what the budget, when it gets to the Appropriations Act, is based on. There are no changes to that. It's based on our research grants, prevention grants as 2 separate strategies, and then the grant review and award operations strategy, as well as the indirect administration strategy. So this does not require, the strategic plan does not require Oversight Committee approval per se, but it will require the signature of the presiding officer when we go to submit it by June 24th. Are there any questions on that? Okay. Then I'll move on to, there's a memo on page 813, which relates to provisional approval of our legislative appropriations request. So the strategic plan is the initial step in the appropriations process, moving forward to the 2017 session that starts next January. So the legislative appropriations request, we are waiting on instructions from the Legislative Budget Board and Governor's Office, and we anticipate that we will have to submit the LAR in early August, prior to the Oversight Committee's actual meeting in August, based on previous experience with the way that the submission schedule has been worked out. So we are requesting provisional approval of the LAR by you today, based on the information that is on page 815. These are the items that we would like to include in the legislative appropriations request. That would be significantly different from just the standard. One is an FTE increase of 3. This would increase our current cap from 32 to 35, should it be approved. The next 4 items relate to riders. One is the addition of a new rider to appropriate any bond premiums earned above the bond proceed amounts to pay the issuance cost of our bonds. Currently, our bonds are paid from within the issuance amounts that are received when TPFA issues its bonds for us. We have requested this in prior sessions. It has never been put into the Appropriations Act. We're also requesting a modification to Rider 4. This is the transfer authority that's available to all state agencies to transfer between their budget line items. This rider actually requires that we receive approval to transfer any monies from either the prevention award or research award to any other of our other strategies. There is a general provision that other state agencies have that they can transfer 20% among those strategies other than into indirect administration. And so we would like to request that our rider our specific rider be changed to allow the CEO to simply report versus receiving approval of the transfer between budget line items within that 20%, because it can delay the appropriate authority within the agency to try to manage administrative priorities as we move through the year. The next rider request would be to strike Rider 5, which would be the transfer to the State Health Services for the Cancer Registry. Currently, there is a transfer of $2.9 million that we are required to make per year to the State Health Services in support of the Cancer Registry. Since last summer, we actually became aware of an issue that we are actually supporting, in addition to that $2.9 million, there's money actually being drawn from our bond proceeds by the Employees Retirement System to fund the insurance contributions for retired Cancer Registry employees. And this is pursuant to a General Appropriations Act rider where benefits are paid proportional by fund. And this amount, there's no budget item in our budget, in State Health Services budget, and ERS's budget where this is recognized. But we actually there have been $500,000 in bond proceeds actually drawn out of our account in support of this benefit. So it is a bit of an issue for us.
Can I ask a question? How
Yes.
long have we been on?
Since 2011. The other rider item is to strike Rider 7, which is the rider that is a limitation on the expenditure for contracts that requires we receive LBB approval on all contracts in excess of $250,000. This has been in place since the 2013 session, and originally in the last 2 years that amount was $100,000. The legislature did increase that last session to $250,000, which has provided us some relief, but there are still issues obviously with waiting for approval by the Legislative Budget Board for our contracts, and so we would like to request that this be struck from our budget. The last two items, one is on a request to increase the CEO exempt salary amount. This request would actually have to be made through the administrator's statement in the Legislative Appropriations Act. That I believe this has been discussed by the Governance Subcommittee, but the increase would allow an recruitment incentive should the agency have to ever replace the CEO, and it could also provide room for merit incentives. The last item is a request that the Interest and Sinking Fund, which is actually created in Health and Safety Code, Section 102.270, actually be created in the Treasury, and that means that it has to be included in the exempt from funds consolidation, and that's a separate bill that goes through both appropriations committees during the session. We have requested this in the past too, and it wasn't included. So that means that all of the revenue that we receive currently from our revenue sharing payments flows into general revenue. We track it, but it flows into general revenue. It's just part of the general fund. If this interest and sinking fund were created in the Treasury, then the revenue would flow into this fund, and you could capture it and see it.
And be used for a specific purpose.
Right, and then be appropriated later by the...
That can only be determined, the amount and the timing of it, by legislative appropriation, not by us. That it has to be appropriated.
Mr. Montgomery.
I have a question on the very first item, the request for FTE increase. Later on we're asked to approve a contract with Cone Resnick to assist with compliance functions. Does the increase of 3 people, 3 FTEs, take care of, or is it in addition to the Cone Resnick staff?
So, that's a very good question. If the...
Win for me.
The 3 FTEs, basically the Cone Resnick contract is equivalent to 3 full-time FTEs. Were this to be approved, we could transition that contract from having the contract to having full-time employees perform those functions.
Okay, and I would presume that 3 full-time employees is cheaper than the Cone Resnick. I hope there's no one from Cone Resnick, no offense, but it's probably cheaper than the Cone Resnick expense.
Yes.
Yeah.
Dr. Rice?
Was that the intent of this request, or do we like outsourcing that and we just need to increase our FTE count for other reasons? Maybe I missed the connection there. In other words,
That is the reason for this request, is to increase the number of FTEs to cover the compliance and then be able to reduce that contract from our budget.
Thank you.
I think it's in order to continue with what I must say is an excellent compliance program, we need Cone Resnick right now.
Yes.
We'd like to add 3 more people in the hopes that we can keep that compliance function in-house in the future.
Thank you.
And, I mean, it would have to be a transition. I mean, once the FTEs are approved, then we still have to bring people on board, and so it would be a transition.
And mind you, this is some 17, 18 months in the future if they give us the authority.
Any other questions? Members, it's my understanding that the Audit Subcommittee met on May 9 and recommends approval of the draft strategic plan and legislative appropriations request. We've had an opportunity to ask Ms. McConnell questions. Are there any questions anyone would like to direct to the Audit Committee or members of the Audit Committee? If not, we'll take up the vote on the state strategic plan first. As Ms. McConnell explained, the strategic plan must be signed by the chair of the Oversight Committee when it's submitted on June 24th. Do I have a motion to authorize the chair to sign a final draft? Got a motion? Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed. The motion carries. Moving on to the proposed legislative appropriations request, Ms. McConnell explained that CPRIT's request is not in the final format while the agency waits for instructions from the governor's office and the LBB. It is likely that the request must be filed before the next OC meeting in August. We will vote on the substance of the draft request. In the event that the Oversight Committee does not meet again before CPRIT's request is due, the Audit Subcommittee will review the final draft prior to submission to confirm that it is consistent with what has been presented today. And if there are substantive changes, the Oversight Committee will have to come back together and vote on those changes. But this vote will approve the substance of this recommendation and subject later to the Audit Committee confirming that what we propose to submit is substantially the same as this recommendation. Do I have a motion to approve the draft legislative appropriations request subject to final review by the Audit Subcommittee?
So moved.
Got a motion and a second. All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. Now turn to tab 9. Ms. McConnell will present the staff recommendation for a grant management support services contract.
So again, this is provisional approval of the grant management support services contract. We have issued an request for proposal for an end-to-end grant management support services contract that includes grant application receipt, peer review evaluation, and the meeting support for that, and post-award grants management on May 2nd. That RFP is currently open and is open for 45 days. It closes on June 16th. Going back to the rider that we are required to get LBB approval for contracts over $250,000. This new contract would have to start on September 1st for us to continue to have all of the support we currently have. So we are requesting that the Oversight Committee provide us with provisional approval and allow, again, the audit subcommittee at a meeting in mid-June to verify when we were able to bring forward a recommendation of an actual vendor to provide these services to us, that they can confirm that all of the basic terms have been met, and then we can submit our request to the Legislative Budget Board for contract approval 45 days before the end of the fiscal year, so that we can have continuity in services. Again, if the audit subcommittee determines that the cost of the contract is inconsistent with the amount provisionally approved by the Oversight Committee, CPRIT would convene a meeting of the Oversight Committee to approve that contract. But otherwise, this process, we believe, would work. Any questions?
Any other questions for Ms. McConnell on this matter? Is there a motion to provisionally approve a contract of $10 million for grant management support services? Got a motion?
Second.
And a second. All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. Now, direct your attention to tab 10. Ms. McConnell will now present the fiscal year 2017 bond issuance resolution.
So we are requesting that the Oversight Committee approve the issuance of $300 million in fiscal year 2017 of bonds by the Texas Public Finance Authority on our behalf. The estimate is that we will request that TPFA actually issue $233.4 million in commercial paper notes 4 times during fiscal year 2017 to pay for our administrative expenses as well as the grant reimbursement expenses and authorized advances related to awards made in prior years, including 2017. And the one, I've been asked this question, so the $300 million is based on our appropriations authority. This estimate of what we're actually issuing and what we're requesting TPFA to issue is part of the package that we actually have to send over to the Public Finance Authority. In fiscal year 2016, we will, by the end of this year, have requested $277.3 million be issued. And we do currently have in long-term bonds $848.8 million outstanding. So are there any questions related to our issuance request?
Dr. Rosenfeld.
Thank you for the report. As we start to get closer to sundowning, I was just wondering and we're appropriating $300 million a year, do we have to keep more money in reserve for that final year? For expenses, shutdown expenses?
Well, actually, no. The first 2 years that the agency was in existence, the legislature actually didn't appropriate the full $300 million. It was $225 million each year those first 2 years. Also in 2013, with the moratorium, the agency actually did not use all of its bond authority that year to make grant awards. So there's actually quite a bit of bond authority left from that. So CPRIT will not actually expend all of its $3 billion bond authority by the sunset date of August 31st, 2021. And in that final year of operations, the agency will actually, the Oversight Committee will actually not be able to make any new grant awards based on the way the legislation is written. That would end on August 31st, 2020. And then the agency would continue to operate for another year under the current sunset date.
So I had a follow-up question about the sunset date also. Maybe it's a little premature to talk about this. But as we're funding companies and we're getting revenue based on royalties, it is likely that if there's a success, those royalties won't be being paid until after the sunset date. How will that money be accounted for if there's no CPRIT?
Well, in that case, the sunset legislation will transfer certain authorities to some other entity yet to be identified, or it could continue a small CPRIT for that express purpose. But you're right. In fact, many of our grants will not be concluded by the end of the sunset date. There will need to be some kind of grant compliance monitoring continued, with an ultimate phase down of that. What Heidi did not mention, I mean, you've just got through addressing our budget request. In the months ahead, for August consideration, will be a discussion of our non-budgetary legislative requests, which will include a request that the legislature extend our sunset date to at least August 31, 2023, which would give us an opportunity to use or maximize to the extent possible those amounts of unused bonds that Heidi referred to. We're estimating right now it's about $350 million. So another 2 years would be able to get us close. And I might add that there's a lot of interest by the institutions of higher education and the advocate community to do that.
Dr. Rice? Yeah.
Just so I understand, thank you for that discussion. Just so I understand, it might be possible, though, for us to make a MIRA grant in 2020, which could be a 5-year grant and would therefore continue on and need to be administered and checked and whatnot until 2024 or something thereabouts. So I want to make sure I understand. So it is indeed likely that we'll have some kind of need to have some
Extremely
kind of structure.
likely.
Okay.
Probable.
For
I mean,
many years after the 20.
Never want to say guaranteed. But those are issues that do get taken up in the sunset process, and as we get closer to it, we'll go through that process with you. But that is a state audit on steroids. That's going to be a 9-month process, as I recall, beginning with an exhaustive state agency self-evaluation that is then reviewed by the Sunset Commission staff, that then goes to public hearings. I mean, it's rigorous.
Thank you. Ms. McConnell, what did you say about that last year, September 1 to August 30, 20 into 21, we would not be able to make grants during that period?
Make new grant awards, yes.
Could not?
Mm-hmm, that's correct.
Explain that. Even if we have funding authority still present at that point, why are we not able to?
I'll defer to our general counsel.
The statute sets that limitation, and I believe it's probably to allow for the sunset review process. So we have, our sunset is August 31st, 2021, unless the agency's extended, but they want that full last year before sunsetting for us to be able to wind up our operations.
I see. Thank you. Any other questions for Ms. McConnell? Members, is there a motion to approve the FY 2017 bond issuance resolution?
So moved.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Motion and a second. All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. The chair now recognizes Mr. Burgess to present the Chief Compliance Officer's report. It's behind tab 11 in your book.
Good morning again. I usually get you after lunch, so this is...
You got us afternoon, just not after lunch.
Yes. You'll find my report behind tab 11, as Mr. Guerin said. And there's two things I wanted to highlight in particular. On tab 11, page 11.5 shows you a graph of our delinquent reporting, and this gives you an idea from September through April. And so we monitor delinquent missing reports from our grantees, and from this graph you can see that there's been a significant decrease over time. And we've really tried hard to be more strategic and purposeful in our internal dialogue and meetings, as well as very clear and purposeful in our communication with our grantees. And we were very proud of this. As you can see at the bottom of the graph, roughly 6,800 reports annually we're asking for grantees to submit, averaging out to about 570 a month. So 10 is 2%, 2.2, somewhere around there. As we've spoken in previous OC meetings, I think Mr. Roberts has used the term structural noncompliance, that we would, I'm going to quote you on that, that we would expect as the cost of doing business sort of, it's a moving target, but we're very pleased with these numbers. And the other piece that I wanted to highlight specifically is our training and technical assistance. We visited our very first new grantee back in March. A team of us went down to Corpus Christi to the Coastal Bend Wellness Center and met with the team down there. It was a very positive experience, and one of the kind of neat things we did is we walked them through and help them navigate our grants management system, our online grants management system, which has been a source of consternation for some grantees. And we thought that was a very positive experience. They could kind of one-on-one with them. We also had conducted a grantee webinar at the end of March, and we had about 340 actually grant staff attend that webinar. It was about 2 hours. It was interactive. They could ask questions. We covered reporting requirements, recent administrative rule changes, grant closeout. It was a very informative process, and we have another webinar scheduled for June 15th. I think we have about another 120, 130 signed up for that webinar. And then lastly, we visited, a team of us went up to the Dallas area in April, and we conducted a session at the National Council of University Research Administrators in Cura. And we had about 40 people in our session and current active grantees, and that was a very positive experience as well. So as Mr. Roberts said earlier, our focus really has been on customer service, following the rules with a smile. So that's what we're trying to do, and we feel very, very proud of the staff and what they've done. Any questions for me?
Any questions for Mr. Burgess? Mr. Margot?
Mr. Burgess,
Yes, sir.
does the contract we're talking about, that we approving at $10 million, which I read says it's end-to-end grant management support services that includes the grant application receipt, peer review, evaluation, and post-award grants management. Does that apply to those?
These numbers come out of that system, yes, sir.
Okay, so they're responsible for the reports on time and the follow-up. Is that right?
The grantees put in the information, and we pull it out, and then we work with the grantees one-on-one. So if a report shows up on, a missing report shows up here, we, grant accountants and grant specialists, we are working with them to say, why wasn't this submitted? Let's get this in time, if there's issues with it. The $10 million that you're talking about is just basically the software system and the management and the peer review process.
So this contract that we just tentatively approved pending requests doesn't have anything to do with the oversight of reports from grantees?
Correct. That is the compliance program.
That's strictly internal?
Correct.
Could I ask,
Dr. Rice?
I wondered if the SRI program, though, when it, does it notice, it notes the date that something gets, it's submitted or whatever. It might have in its software the schedule that says that institution, that grantee has an account, has a rep report due. does it send a flag to us or to that grantee that says, geez, your report was due yesterday, have you planned to do it? Does it have that kind of capability?
They would receive notification in the system saying your report is due this date, and they usually get a significant amount of time in advance. If it's late, it still shows up as due, and then we are the ones that are contacting them and working with them to get that submitted on time.
And does the software supply you with kind of a work list that says, here's the delinquent list, or is that how that would
Yes,
work?
and this is what we pull on a weekly basis, our delinquent report list that shows the institution, the name of the report, the due date, and actually what queue the report is in.
And then you all, as part of the work of the compliance team, is in touch with the grant recipient? Is that
Yes,
kind of-
and the grant accountants work as well.
Okay,
in that
thank you.
process, yes.
And just to add some clarification, almost all of our communication and reporting, including the financial status reports, so it's everything that goes with reimbursing our grantees, all of that is contained in the grant management system that is part of the contract that we ask for provisional approval. And after the 2013 legislative session, it was actually included in our statute that we have a system to maintain that documentation. Up until that point, we had been using some interim systems and had some reporting and some documentation, that we maintained, and some that was in the interim system. And so, as one step in terms of compliance for the agency to make sure that we're following up on reports, it was included in our statute that we have a system like that to have all of the grant applications and grant reports go through.
Correct.
Mr. Margot?
So it's not, you're not out, all you're getting from that contract is information. Is there a chance that that contract should be elevated or changed if we're spending those kind of dollars to where there ought to be a higher level of monitoring, or does this by statute or otherwise fall into the purview of Vince and his staff?
And so under the statute, it's the chief compliance officer's responsibility to take that information and report to the Oversight Committee about reports that are delinquent or missing. And so using the grant management system facilitates that reporting.
Any other
Could I just-
questions?
I'm
Dr.
sorry,
Rice?
just one more. I just wondered, and it's maybe a little bit in the details, and so I'll just ask it quickly, and you can. I wondered once the grant, once they've done what they need to do to be eligible for the next kind of payment or something like this, does the grant management system have that part of the process also, or does it cut a check, or is there another system that says, okay, we now can cut a check? How does that work?
If there, for instance, there's a delinquent financial status report, once that report is submitted, it then releases the next report. So it would not release the next required report until that current one that's due or past due is submitted.
But if they're asking for a payment that corresponds to fulfillment of that, whether it's delinquent or not, does the payment part happen also within the SRA system, or is that's different?
No, that is different.
Thank you. I just wanted to
outside the system.
understand.
Yes.
Mr. Doyle?
Go ahead.
So I was going to say, yes, so it's outside of the system. We use the state system to pay the grantees through that. But we also have a step in the process, particularly once the financial status report has been reviewed, there is a step where the operations specialists then do another essential payment pedigree to ensure that all of the reports that are required, to match up what the compliance officers have found, and make sure that everything under the contract has been fulfilled before we provide to a third entity within CPRIT to authorize payment. So it's not just one person that is responsible for seeing something from beginning to end. So we also have built in some kind of double checking of that, triple checking, honestly, of that process.
Thank you. Dr. Rice?
You beg another question, so I'm sorry I'll keep doing it, but I wondered...
I like you better after lunch.
Yeah, sorry. Just as we have a pedigree through the approval process, I wonder if anybody's interested, I know maybe we've touched this before, is there a value or need or for a pedigree process afterwards, just to sort of be looking at that as a process? It's a lot of detailed process that goes on. To your point, people, checking things off, and we've never wondered about that level of detail, and maybe I'll leave that for you to comment on or study, but I wonder if there's a post-award pedigree process that also might either already exist or if it should exist. I'm just wondering out loud if that's of value for the system.
So actually, what Kristen was describing is the pedigree. It's the post-award pedigree. So it is a verification that all of their reports and all of their requirements to the agency have been fulfilled before the payment is released.
And we never see that, though. I'm just, right, we never.
Yeah, it's just part of the documentation that actually we use, that actually when I authorize the payment, it's part of the record for each quarterly payment or even in advance, that they have fulfilled all of their requirements.
And we instituted that this past year after it was an internal audit finding that we instituted that process.
Right, so the audit, we have another audit firm, Weaver and Tidwell, that performs audits. That's part of their job as well, to make sure we did everything we promised we were going to do.
Through sampling, yeah.
Right.
Correct.
And they have a schedule of, we're going to do this here or there, in the future.
Gotcha.
I had one other comment. My guess is that the compliance people usually aren't the most popular people on the planet.
I don't know why.
Right, exactly.
I'm a nice guy.
The customer service satisfaction survey that we saw probably has a lot to do with your department, so I just wanted to compliment you, because that's where people get angry, I would think, and where they're made happy.
Thank you.
Just one more quick question. I hate for questions to get in the way of lunch, which never makes you popular. I just wanted to congratulate you on the dramatic decrease in delinquent reports, and had a question. Are there any people or places that are habitually delinquent, or is this just randomly distributed throughout the system?
What we've seen is just there's been a random distribution, it could be, we just had a case where we signed a new contract, but the effective date was 12 months ago. So in the system, all those reports become due at the execution date. So then they're playing kind of catch up, and most of these would just be zeros, or But so some of these reports you would see it's this new grant, and we know, well, they've got a certain time frame to get those in. There's a couple of grantees that we're waiting on audit reports from that would show up on our list, and if you don't submit your required audit or corrective action plan, you are ineligible to receive a new grant. So we're constantly monitoring that, but we have not found any sort of consistent repeat offenders.
Any other questions? We've referred quite often to this chart that's on the overhead and also in our books. I don't think that it was ever read into the record what it shows, but just in quick summary, on September 15th, there were 52 delinquent missing reports, and the chart shows a steady downward trend until April 16th, 10 delinquent reports. So just want to reiterate our thanks to you and your team for your diligent work and the results that you've been able to show in this important area.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Mr. Burgess continues to stand between us and lunch, and don't feel any pressure.
Absolutely not.
I've recognized you to explain the staff recommendation for a compliance support services contract.
Yes. So we spoke about this a little bit earlier in terms of this contract and the increased FTE requests. So we initially awarded a contract with Cohn-Resnick in fiscal year 15, and we exercised a renewal option, a one-year renewal option in FY16, and the request before you today is to renew them for an additional one-year extension. Cohn-Resnick has been instrumental in sort of getting the compliance program off the ground. They have been very helpful in developing our risk assessment model and our tool. They have conducted close to 200 desk reviews so far this fiscal year, and have developed a fairly robust tracking system for us. They have also, just on a day-to-day basis, we meet with them weekly, and they've helped inform our process as we move forward. So our recommendation is to approve an additional one-year extension. We reviewed this at the audit subcommittee, and they recommend approval.
Any questions for Mr. Burgess?
Clarification, the tracking system that CohnReznick has designed for you, that's yours, right? That's
Yeah, that is
owned
ours,
and
yes.
controlled by CPRIT.
It's a SharePoint site, so we have made sure that when that contract goes away, we have the capability
Okay.
to take that information. Yes, sir.
Any other questions?
And that's an hourly contract that maxes out.
Up to.
Yeah,
yes,
up
sir.
to. Thank you.
If there are no other questions, ask for a motion to approve contract renewal for CohnReznick for compliance monitoring services in fiscal year 2017.
So moved.
Got a motion?
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. At this time, I ask you to turn to tab 13 in your book, and I'd like to recognize Ms. Martin to give the internal auditor status report. Welcome, Ms. Martin.
Hello. Good afternoon, members. How are you? With me is Dan Graves as well from Weaver, and we do have a short report, so I won't stand too far between you and lunch. We are happy to be back working with CPRIT as your internal auditor. We did get a contract signed and have started in earnest in May and set our calendar, all of which is pretty swift auditing between now and August 31st to get a full year internal audit plan performed again in a short amount of time. However, we have a multiple year option, and so hopefully next year that won't be a delay again, and so we'll be able to pace that work out. It's kind of burdensome, frankly, on the staff to have 4 audits and 2 follow-ups all within a compressed amount of time. So we'll get through that as best we can and as swiftly as we can, and report to you at each meeting our status.
Great.
So on page 13-1 is just a reiteration of our internal audit plan that was approved as of the end of last fiscal year and included in the annual internal audit report for CPRIT that was filed. The first audit is over commodity and service contracts. That audit has already been planned, started, fieldwork executed, and Dan will address that audit a little bit more specifically after I complete this. The next audit is over revenue. So earlier we were talking about receipt of some of the royalty payments and as well as other funding sources that come into the agency, and that audit will be conducted between June and July. The third audit is information security. Specifically, that was a request that we consider information security on an annual basis at the approval of our internal audit plan last year. This information security audit was already contemplated for the fiscal 2016 year, and this will be your first deep dive into information security and essentially a baseline internal audit over information security. As a reminder, information technology, which security is a component of, has been audited each year. It is through Grant Thornton's annual audit process, and then again last year we performed a follow-up. So technology has always been touched, but information security, this is the first time. And then lastly, cash management. And cash management really going through the treasury, custody, and care of our funding, as well as the coordination with the controller's office and the use of USAS. As a reminder, last year we performed an internal audit of the expenditure process, so payments out. We'll be looking at revenue, which is incoming cash flows, and then the cash management process to really get a balance of that cycle. So that is your internal audit plan for the specific internal audits for this fiscal year. Going to the next page, you'll see we also have planned activities to perform internal audit follow-up procedures over the open findings as of the end of last year. So there were 2 open findings on the information technology audit that we followed up on last year. Were not able to close all the prior findings. There were 2 that were open. The primary consideration there was the the information technology officer conducting an IT risk assessment, a more specific IT risk assessment. And so we will perform follow-up, and based on management's assertion of where they are on their follow-up plan, we expect to be able to close those issues, but that is our job to go back and validate. The second internal audit follow-up is over the grant management process. So you were just talking about kind of through the cycle. And last year we performed, one of Weaver's first internal audits was over the grant management cycle. And it included the touch points for compliance, where compliance has responsibility for pieces of that cycle. So it includes the pre-award, the post-award, and the closeout procedures. And it really it covers all of the touch points that Kristen mentioned earlier with the various departments across the agency. Through that audit, we had 8 moderate and 1 low finding. We've heard already commentary on some of the efforts to close some of those findings, but we will perform in June the follow-up procedures on the remediation activity or the closing of those findings to validate that they truly have been closed. And so those 2 follow-ups I think are very important and a good use of our concentrated time to be able to give you comfort that management's response has been effective. And that concludes the internal audit activities. Finally, as a part of our annual plan responsibilities, we will take the risk assessment that was performed last year, validate that it's still appropriate and relevant, and is not. And if anything does change, risk ratings change, activities change, then we will update that risk assessment and reassess the already contemplated fiscal 2017 and 18 internal audit plans. Just as a reminder, our process is to present 3 years worth of plans, so that you have some forward-looking activities, and then each year reassess, are the risks still appropriate, do the plan and the progressive order still make sense, and then present to you any of our recommended change. And then lastly, as an agency, you have a responsibility to post an annual internal audit report, and we have the responsibility of preparing that and posting that for you after approval. So we'll bring that to you after the 8/31 year end, and typically that is kind of the November timeframe that you would receive that. So that's our internal audit plan. If there are questions on these 2 pages, the specific internal audit plan, I'll take them now. Otherwise, Dan will give you a little preview into what the first audit included.
Any questions for Ms. Martin? All right, go ahead, Dan.
Thank you. Yes, as Elisa mentioned, we have performed our first internal audit over commodity and service contracts. The scope of that audit included the sub-processes of contract initiation and execution, contract management, and contract closeout. We have completed those procedures. We did have an exit meeting today to preview with management the results of our procedures preliminarily, and then we'll progress on to drafting a report and presenting those to the audit subcommittee in the future.
And as our standard practice, as we perform each audit, we will present to the audit committee and then subsequently to you the specific risk activities that our procedures are designed to cover, so that you have a little bit deeper insight as to what we're looking for to ensure effective management over those processes. And that's what is included in that list of risks on page 13.3.
Great. Any other questions? Okay, if there are no questions, thank you both very much for your presentation.
Thank
for
you.
Your work.
We're happy to be here.
Now, I'd like to direct our attention to materials behind tab 14. At this time, the chair recognizes Ms. Stoll to address agenda item number 17, the final order approving changes to CPRIT's administrative rules.
There are 3 proposed rule changes. We discussed these at the February Oversight Committee meeting. Since that time, after you gave preliminary approval for publication in the Texas Register, we have published them. We received 1 comment from University of Texas at Dallas. The comment regarded the rule change that set up a process to appeal the waiver of reimbursement on FSRs. The comment was requesting instructions on the specific tab to use in our grant management system to submit the request if appeal of a waiver was going to occur. So we've declined to make a change to the administrative rule. That's really something that's handled through the instructions that are present on our grant management system. If we incorporate it into the rule, it makes it much harder to change if for some reason we change our grant management system or we change the tab that is coming in. And that's better handled through an instruction rather than a policy change like we are doing with the administrative rule. So I have listed the 3 changes to the administrative rules on page 14-3 in your book. I'm happy to go over them again. There were changes to the conflict of interest rules to clarify that acting as a consultant or a contractor is a professional conflict of interest. We also clarified that visa expenses are not authorized grant expenses. And then finally, the change to develop a process to appeal the waiver of reimbursement. Those are the 3 changes that, if you approve the final orders, will become final once we submit it with the Secretary of State. We presented these to the Board Governance Committee, and they have recommended approval of these changes.
All right, there's a memo from the Board Governance Subcommittee in your board packet recommending approval. Are there any questions from Ms. Doyle or the Board Governance Subcommittee? If not, is there a motion to approve the final order adopting CPRIT's rule changes and to direct staff to file the order with the Secretary of State?
So moved.
Have a motion? And a second. All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. I may be reaching the outer limits of our biology and our patience, but
We've asked those a long time ago.
I'd like to take up our item number 19 out of order. It's behind tab 15 in your book. The chair recognizes Dr. Mulrow and Mr. Roberts to present the Diversity Subcommittee report, which is behind tab 15 in your agenda book.
Dr. Mulrose requested me to provide a brief summary. The Diversity Subcommittee did meet on May 6th and discussed a variety of issues that are summarized in the memo. We have one significant item to bring to your attention and for your consideration over the summer, and that is transferring the responsibilities of the subcommittee to other standing subcommittees. This discussion is that the charges for the Diversity Subcommittee be transferred to academic research, product development research, prevention, and the audit subcommittees. The subcommittee members attending the meeting recommended that this action be considered. That's what they were asking to be considered. Diversity issues are important and should be considered by all OC members through their participation on one or more of the 3 main program subsidy committees. These issues include increasing participation by individuals from groups historically underrepresented in science and medicine, geographic and population services, and dispersion of awards, as well as the main agency employment practices and state-mandated hub vending requirements. Issues of increasing participation by individuals from groups historically underrepresented are perhaps best addressed through the 3 subsidy program committees. The hub purchasing efforts and diversity of agency personnel and HR policies are perhaps best addressed through the agency operating budget and procurement issues, which are considered by the audit subcommittee. So the subcommittee asked each of you to consider this recommendation and to provide feedback to them for their consideration at their August meeting prior to the next Oversight Committee meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Very important issue for
Absolutely.
us to thoughtfully and thoroughly deliberate. You've teed the issues up for us now. I don't know if you members of the Oversight Committee at this point would like to ask any questions of either Mr. Roberts or Dr. Mulrow. We do plan and certainly will have opportunity to thoroughly consider this. The implications are significant, and we recognize that. Any questions or requests for additional clarification of Mr. Roberts or Dr. Mulrow at this point? Could I just ask you to speak to how you see this opportunity to thoroughly deliberate this issue will unfold over the coming months? How we will have an opportunity? Will it be in the subcommittees, or in some other exchange of information? How we will initiate the discussion, deliberation, and reach a point where we can make a recommendation?
Yes, I'll be charging each of the 4 program chiefs involved with this, Dr. Wilson, Dr. Garcia, Mike Lang, and Heidi McConnell, to discuss it with them. I don't think that it is going to add an extraordinary burden to each one of those committees, but the thrust of this, the import here, is CPRIT's agency operations, how we do our contracting and our actual personnel policies, are just a small part of what we do. It's important, but it's a small part. And a lot of our hub statistics are distorted because of the one really large contract we have with SRA. But our traditional purchasing and contract targets that are given to us, we do a fairly good job of meeting. But there's always room to do better that we strive to. I do believe that our personnel diversity figures are quite good. Again, I think that there's a culture at our agency to look for the very best person for each of the slots, and this policy has actually led us to have a quite diverse staff. And we will be sharing those statistics as they're compiled. The ones we've got now are old, but they will reflect, well, I might add that we reflect quite well on gender. But you know, the real import we've got here is the pipeline issue with respect to institutions of higher education. And they each have diversity and their own policies that if they're a private institution that they've adopted on their own, or as a public institution, they're certainly supportive, but they've also been required to address these issues just as CPRIT has by the state legislature. And it's sort of a chicken and an egg. They will report that we would like to increase the numbers of people from underrepresented groups in our graduate programs, but we can only take people that are coming up through the undergraduate programs, who can only take people that are coming up through the high schools. And I've heard this going on for 25 to 30 years, and it precedes me. And I do think that to the extent we can encourage participation and involvement, we should do so, and that's best done through the 3 programs. In the case of scientific research, we have anecdotal evidence that there has been significant gains made through the training grants, which are roughly 3% of that program's funding. But those have largely been focused at women and students from groups that are historically not involved in the sciences or in the medicine. We need to do a better job on collecting those data. At this last meeting, I mentioned that I'd seen a presentation from one of our institutions. It's been a while since I saw it, but I think that perhaps a deeper dive into what each one of the institutions are doing, because I do think they're making effort, but I think we as an organization should keep a greater pressure to do that, and the best vehicle to do that is through these subcommittees.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Any questions? Dr. Mulroy, would you like to add anything to that before we?
Yeah, just that I hardly agree. We think these issues are extremely important, and that they should be an integral part of each of the programs.
It should be embedded in the
That's why we're making that
organization.
recommendation.
I would just ask, it seems like there's a diversity in how we fund things, a diversity in maybe how we train folks, a diversity among our staff, diversity among vendors, and there may be other sort of dimensions of diversity that we want to approach. And so I wonder if we should worry that, notwithstanding the fact that committees, maybe is not the best structure, hasn't had the right attendance, that, is there a diversity officer, I'm wondering, or how you just go ahead and pull that whole thing together of all those dimensions? If you separate out the programs, that's sort of one thing, but that certainly leaves vendors and to Heidi maybe, and kind of, staff to you. And I just wonder if we separate it out, if it still has a cohesive...
I think it will require, it will require some adjustment to the charges to the individual subcommittees. But I'd like to point out that each one, as you know, each one of the subcommittees has a main staff liaison. Dr. Wilson, of course, does academic research. Heidi does the audit subcommittee. To emphasize the significance of this, from the day I came onto the organization, I staffed the diversity subcommittee. As you know, I attend and participate in each of those subcommittees, and I'm open to finding a formal structure to articulate this, but I intend to maintain, be the lead staff, focus on these issues.
Thanks, Mr. Roberts. Any other questions or comments? All right. Well, we will proceed with the examination of this recommendation and understand it not as a moving away from our commitment to diversity, but engaging all of the subcommittees in the commitment to achieve our diversity goals, or formalizing that. Certainly that's been a charge to all of us, implicit in the work that we do, but formally charging all the subcommittees to help our organization achieve those goals. Before we take up agenda item 18, I will note for the record that we will not take up agenda items 20 and 21. These are standing agenda items, and we have no action on those two. At this time, the Oversight Committee will move into closed session to take up agenda item 18. We go into closed session pursuant to Texas Open Meetings Act, Section 551.074, to discuss personnel matters related to the Chief Executive Officer evaluation. The Oversight Committee members will move to the anteroom at this time to convene in closed session. The following CPRIT staff will join the Oversight Committee in the closed session. It will be our General Counsel, Kristen Doyle, and we will come back out of closed session and reconvene no later than... I beg your pardon?
No earlier than.
Oh, pardon me. Well, no later. No earlier than 1:30. The board now the time is 7 minutes until 1, and we will now move to closed session. Oversight Committee now reconvenes in open session. The time is 2:40. Members, is there a motion to authorize an increase in the base salary of the Chief Executive Officer to the legislatively authorized amount of $256,250 per year?
So moved.
Got a motion and a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? There are none. Motion carries.
Thank you, members.
A signed copy of this motion will be placed in the CEO's personnel file, and copies will be sent to the Office of the Governor, LDB, Office of Comptroller of Public Accounts, to serve as notification of this action. Members, I'd like to ask that we reconsider item 11. There were two parts to item 11. One had to do with the strategic plan, and one had to do with the legislative appropriations request. In the legislative appropriations request, among the items listed was, and I quote from it, a request, an increase in the CEO exempt salary in the administrator's statement. There ask for a motion to amend that provision to insert a specific percentage increase as part of that provision of the legislative appropriations request.
So moved.
10%.
I have a motion made by Mr. Montgomery, amended by Mr. Holmes to insert 10% into that increase for the CEO exempt salary.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion is agreed to. Members, we have covered all the agenda items. Our next regular Oversight Committee meeting is August 17th at 10 a.m. CPRIT staff will circulate a tentative agenda prior to that meeting. We also have scheduled an Oversight Committee meeting on September 14th, 2016, which has been added to the schedule. And we are waiting to hear from all of the members as to their availability for that meeting. For those who have not had the opportunity to inform the staff of their availability, I ask that you please do as soon as possible so that we can accommodate schedules. If there's no further business and there is no objection, the chair moves to adjourn this meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. The meeting is adjourned at
What are you up to?
2:43. Thank you. Oh, pardon me.
What if I have adjournment? What if
Let me correct the record. It is at 1:43 p.m.